there are some time restraints that I think is necessary. I think our clerk has to, he has to leave.
I do, but you're fine. You have the assistant.
And, yeah, I was gonna say that.
Yes, sir.
And of course, we want to be true to form and true to our time. So let's go ahead and get started. City Clerk, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please? Present.
Present.
I'm here. Let us bow for just a brief word of prayer. Lord, in the midst of all that we do as a part of our responsibility for this city, as we continue to expand and grow it in meaningful and positive ways, we would ask that as we talk today, as we strategize today, we ask that your Spirit might give us the sort of grace to get things done. We ask it, we claim it in your name. Amen. You have your agenda attached, and of course, 4 specific items we'd like to discuss here today as they were referred to us by our council. And of course, I want to jump right into the conversation, if you all would allow me to do that. There are four concerns, of course, that was brought to us. Of course, the first, of course, was the Columbia Health Initiatives, Columbia Clean Initiative, and I think that's why Sarah is here with Robert today. Is that right? You all going to do a presentation for us? All right, I just want to make sure that meant yes. We want to talk a little bit about the development of boards and commissions and the structure, and of course, we want to say a word about the development of policies, procedure, and structures for advisory committees on the equity index. And I think all of our members have a copy of that index profile. Is that right? Is that right? Okay. Let's start off with our health initiative. Pam?
Yes, sir. Reverend McDowell has certainly been an advocate for us having some emphasis on our community health here at the City of Columbia. So we have had a lot of discussions about creating a Columbia Health Initiative in the terms of maybe doing it as a board or a committee. So our suggestion as staff is that we maybe take a step back and put some emphasis on the 4 major health issues that seem to be the biggest issues for our communities. Those would be diabetes, amputations, heart disease, and hypertension. And the thought is that we would start by focusing on one of those health issues at a time and do things collaboratively with our partners out there in the community that are working with these health issues. So the first health disparity we wanted to talk about was diabetes, and have some diabetes awareness in conjunction with council, and make sure that we are working with those entities, again, out there in the community that work on these types of issues. Diabetes, November is Diabetes Prevention Month. So the concept is that we will focus on that particular health issue and do some activities around that promotion of awareness and prevention, and have a real clear council dedicated focus again on that. So the concept was maybe to have a walk for life. And again, we were doing this with Reverend McDowell's input. having a Walk for Life, partner with South Carolina DHEC and the South Carolina Diabetes Action Council to promote their In It Together initiative and do a lot of PR, press conference, a whole campaign around diabetes prevention in the month of November. So that was the initial thought, is to start there, and then subsequently add those other 3 health concerns to the calendar. We know like heart health is in February, and so we can add events as the years progress. But we like to start with a kickoff of diabetes prevention in November. Did I sum it up?
Yes, ma'am.
Reverend McDowell?
One of the things that we initially talked about, the genesis of this conversation started almost a year ago, when we looked at the possibility of perhaps sort of adopting a plan that was similar to a plan that originated out of New Orleans, but it gave a larger approach to that plan and involved more folk in terms of a board of directors and that sort of thing. One of the things that I thought was very interesting is that there are some real critical areas. We've talked about it, Joe and I have talked about it some. There are some real critical areas in 29203 that's related to diabetes, amputation, hypertension issues, and of course, heart disease. And one of the things that I wanted to do, you took something from me. Okay, good, all right. One of the things that I think is interesting for us, instead of starting with a larger committee in some shape, form, or fashion, but to do it in terms of the issue that is resonated within our city. And of course, want to start small, but we also want to make this emphasis because we want to declare November as National Diabetes Month with a walk for life, a 1.5, maybe a mile walk, inviting persons to come in and be of support of that. So we want to start small and perhaps further down the road initiating something much larger. What you all think? Dr. Russell?
It's great.
Mr. Taylor? All right.
Yeah.
But that was easy, wasn't it? I'm gonna get through before 4 o'clock then.
You need a motion or anything?
No, I think we're okay. We will bring this to council. Isn't that right, TK? We will bring it to council as a report from our committee. Is that okay? Pam, thank you very much.
Absolutely,
Now,
yes, sir.
please know that publicity, that we do plan to promote this in such a way, and will invite persons to walk with us, whether it's a mile or a half a mile, or whether it's 3 blocks. We want to invite folk to come and be a part of this emphasis. And I think the larger concept, we don't throw it totally out of the window, but at least we got a good starting point.
Absolutely, yes, sir. We'll work with our Public Relations Department on helping us with press releases, press conference, making sure we advertise. The hope is that we partner with those individuals at DHEC and those other entities, South Carolina Diabetes Action Council, to coordinate with them.
I have been
to
in
make sure.
contact, of course, with DHEC and with a person there at DHEC under that In It Together emphasis, and they are very, very interested in partnering with us.
Yes, sir. So we'll reach out with them and we'll put together a plan of action to make that happen for us in November.
Sounds good.
Yes, sir.
Sounds good. Thank you all so much. Okay, Robert, Sarah, and anyway, yes, you got that? Did you turn it off? Robert, come on and, All right, Robert,
Good
Mr.
af-
Shealy,
Good afternoon,
and
Reverend
Sarah,
McDowell,
and Sarah,
counselors.
they're with us. I got some trees that I need to come down, Sarah. I'm just kidding, I'm just kidding.
They came down last week.
They came down. Thank you so much.
Everybody knows Robert
Yes.
Anderson, our Public Works Director, and Sarah Holler, who was formerly the Superintendent of Forestry and Beautification, is our Deputy Director for Public Works and has been for several years. So Sarah, thank you for being with us today as well. So we want to talk a little bit about the Columbia Clean Initiative, which I think came to overall council and was referred to the committee through a motion of Councilman Brennan. And it was a concept of potentially under the Columbia Water umbrella, looking at utilizing staff and resources for beautification of our entire service area. And as we drill down and talk some more with the legal team and others, and you folks, I think we had discussions about appropriate use of funds and areas of focus. And so we've kind of honed in on the city limits and utilizing public works staff to forward this initiative. So what we've got for you today is some slides, and we're going to start off, Robert and Sarah are going to start off with a little overview of the services that we already provide. I think it might provide good background and context from forestry and beautification standpoint. Talk a little bit about some of the special projects that we've got that are moving forward, some of the existing partnerships that we have with others in the community and some potential partnerships, and then move to the initiatives and ideas and hope that we'll have more of an open discussion about how we might formulate this program and move forward with funding and focus areas. So I'm going to turn it over to Robert and or Sarah, and we're happy to answer any questions throughout as we move forward.
Thank you, Clint.
Yes, sir.
Well, one of the things I do want to mention, of course, Councilman Brennan has had some conversation either with you, Clint, and with me, of course. This, of course, sort of gives us a great idea of what possibly could happen, and he's in support of that. I'm sorry, Robert, go right ahead.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for some time this afternoon. It's a presentation we developed probably several weeks ago, and we kind of got bumped around, so we've updated it a little bit. And some of the early slides we're going to run through, the divisional overview. The budget was passed. Forestry runs on about $2.7 million. The forestry side's got about 982,000. They remove stumps, grinding of approximately 400 trees a year. They plant around 500 trees a year. They do all the pruning, and as of anybody was out last weekend, we do a lot of storm response. I believe last Thursday night we had 66 calls, I believe, somewhere around there. And then Friday we had only 2 or 3 until we found out the next day that it looked like World War III over on Shady Lane. And if nobody's been on Shady Lane, it was right interesting when I got over there on Monday, I believe. So the right-of-way section's got about 963 trees. Of course, we mow. They help us plant in the fall when they're not mowing. They help us plant 500 trees. We have a sidewalk edging crew. This crew here was put in by the city manager several years ago, and the idea is for the gateways that are coming into town. These crews rotate through the main thoroughfares, and if we have time, when we had the personnel, we rotate through the secondary thoroughfares. And what we try to do is mow them, edge them, and make sure the sidewalks are passable, and make sure it does look like a presentable city when we're coming in. Right now, just like everybody, we're still short of crews. We are starting to get applications. We're starting to hire crews quickly and starting to still run them through Express. So some of these projects will be coming back online. And then horticulture is $834,000. That's the landscape plantings and the landscape maintenance. We'll talk a little bit more about that. The next slide is somewhat simple overview.
Question for you before we move
Yes,
on.
ma'am.
How many people are we short in the sidewalk edging crew? Because I don't think the gateways are where they should be in terms of upkeep.
Don't disagree with you, and I think we lost our crew leader for our mowing. I believe we pulled the whole crew about a month and a half ago. So I don't know that, I know we approved a requisition to hire the crew leader back today, so that should put our edging crew back in the street about July 11th is whenever we're going to. And he is a former employee that's experienced, so he'll have no training coming up on our crew leaders and running our mowers. So we'll move those crews back to edging and mowing sidewalks.
Good. Now, Robert, we understand the dilemma, of course, about being short with persons. How's that recruiting going?
The recruiting is going real great. The express recruiting is very good. Forestry's filling their place up. Solid Waste, when I talked to Samantha yesterday, only had 7 vacancies, which means we have almost a full complement of people. We're always going to lose some, win some, but we're starting to get applications again, and I think that's encouraging. And we're still finding applicants don't show up for interviews. That's just the new norm. So we try to capture them when they walk in the door. If they walk in the door for an interview, they get an interview on the spot. And I would say 9 times out of 10, they get a job offer on the spot. So the next is just a quick overview of forestry. I think we really want to get into what we do and our current practices. So our mowing crews aim for a 14-day mowing cycle. We aim for 14-day bed maintenance. That includes the bed mulching throughout the year. We try to do that once or twice a year. We plant yearly annuals, but we are slowly, under Caleb's leadership, he had started, and we will continue to convert our annuals to perennials. You can see a lot of that on Assembly Street. I think you'll see some on Bull Street. I believe you'll see some on Rosewood as we can continue to convert them. So we're trying to cut back on our annual flowers. But we will continue to plant some, and we have some successes, and we have some failures on our plant selections. But I believe Sarah would tell you that the only way to go would be Vincas. Am I correct? Okay, so that they are very hardy and they fill up a great area. We currently had our edging crew, but currently we have one. We will be putting them back on the street in a couple weeks. Remember, they only focus on main thoroughfares. So if you take a little bit of the edging crew and think of Farrow Road. So Farrow Road is where we start. I think it's about 2 miles to the end of Farrow Road. So one crew has to work one side 3 times to edge the road. So they edge one side of the sidewalk, they got to edge the other side of the sidewalk, and they edge the curb side. So when they get through, they've edged actually 6 sides of the road and blew and mowed that. So it does take quite some time to do it. We've looked into some mechanized equipment, haven't found anything that we really are satisfied with. There is a new hydraulic disc blade that you can put on a Gravely lawnmower that we were looking at, and it was not patented yet. But when it becomes patented, we will probably try to put one on our Gravely. It's hydraulically driven to see if we can't edge roads a little bit, or edge sidewalks a little bit faster.
So Robert, logistically, when you say 6 cuts, is that the sidewalk side and the street side?
So we have one side of the sidewalk, then we do the other side of the sidewalk, so we edge it to make sure it's got a good crisp
We
line,
do it this side,
Yep.
sidewalk.
and then the curb. And then we turn around and do it on the other side. So we're making several passes when we go through.
So you say that you guys aim for a 14-day mowing cycle and bed cycle. What is the reality?
20, Sarah? Probably. I mean, I think we got a little bit better because of the drought. Rain's going to affect our growing cycle. When there was a drought, we could actually mow a little bit quicker, and it didn't grow back a little bit quicker. Sarah and I actually had a conversation yesterday. 126 looks great, except for if you look at the dandelions that are out there. But if the dandelions weren't there, the mowing wouldn't look so bad. So would it be in our best interest to spray a herbicide out on 126 for the dandelions, keep the dandelions down, so therefore if we're not back as soon, the mowing would be a little bit more crisp. So we have several ideas, and we keep rolling ideas around through the department as we can to figure that out.
What are we doing with the medians and things like that? That's DOT's issue, but it's our look.
So currently, and I have that a little bit later in the presentation. I got medians, but and I will address that, okay, of where we're working right now. We have tree removals that we do during the year. Right now, of course, after a storm, we're inspecting a lot of trees that had limbs fall out of them, and the tree removals will go up and down on the health assessments. I believe Councilman Duvall sent one to us today, and one developed into 2. So we do use contractors. Go.
So if there's a
tree in, like in a median somewhere, that a neighborhood wants it taken out, can we do something like that? Or
As long as it meets our guideline for removals, we will take it out. If it's a healthy tree, generally not.
there's a bit of trivia here. On Heatherwood in Tamaka, there's an island. And it's got a redwood tree planted, and it was planted 100 years ago, and it's surrounded by a wrought iron fence. I never knew this story until.
I was through there the other day because a tree fell.
That's what, you know where you looked at the road, where the road's
Yeah.
coming out? All right, that island right there. And there's two big pine trees growing on either side of this redwood tree. And the neighborhood has been chasing me to take those two pine trees out.
I believe, and I'll defer to Sarah, pine trees are not as important as some of the other trees. Am I correct? We will take some pines out.
I mean, they want it taken out so the redwood tree will grow more. I mean, the redwood tree's probably about 70 feet tall. I mean, I think it's the only one growing in Columbia. There is, exactly. So
So,
would we go take those two trees out? Would you do that for me? Thank you. It's it's
Sarah,
an interesting human interest story for you.
Sarah, I'm sorry, Joe, go right ahead.
Go ahead.
Let me ask this question. Sarah, let me ask you this. How does, in one of my areas, particularly the Bonneville Road area, we understand the camouflage policy ordinance whenever that was adopted. There are some huge oak trees on the, and I think one or two of those places, of course, we've been in touch with either you. I think Robert may have visited a place with me there in Edgewood on Bonneville Road, where the trees are, I mean, beautiful oak trees, but they're in the right of way. And of course, the root systems are of such, and folk are constantly asking me about tree removal. Of course, if it's a dead tree, I understand, we're gonna take it down. Or if it's a part of a tree that's dead, we generally try to manicure that tree. Do you think there needs to be a revisiting of that whole camouflage policy?
For the tree canopy?
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I think that's probably a question for council.
I figured I'd get that answer.
I think overall, our general rule of thumb so far has been that we want to try to keep the canopy that we have.
That's correct.
So when you cut down the larger trees and replace them with the smaller ones, you don't have as much canopy. Now, we don't want to keep trees that are not safe, so that's why we do go look at them. Trees can change over time though, so just because it was okay last year doesn't mean it's okay this year.
That's correct.
So my advice would be just to keep an eye on it and see if we need to relook at it. The other thing I will say is we don't look at trees that are on private property, just in the right of way.
All right, well, I'm sorry, Robert.
And Councilman, I also want to point out, we're actually doing a study right now with the university through a grant that we're actually heat mapping the city of Columbia. That will show you the benefits of the canopy through our CPAC organization and show you the benefits of what shade really does versus where shade is not. We're going to actually use the heat map to develop hopefully a better plan to plant some of our canopy trees. So there's good sides and bad sides. I do think we need to look at these trees again if there's some concerns to make sure they're healthy.
I called it camouflage, but it's canopy, I'm sorry. I engendered some smiles, thank you. I think it's very important that we look at that, Robert, and if we're doing that, if USC gives us that kind of data and we're able to see where there are some real trouble spots, I think we need to make sure. I think like the place you're talking about over there, Joe, and I think there are several, and I think we may have visited a place there off of Bonneville Road.
It was
where
there by the
Roots-
church.
You remember?
Bonneville,
You remember? And of course, we offered to them a covering of those stumps, not stumps, but roots that had grown from the right-of-way into this person's yard and found it pretty hazardous for her to walk. So getting that kind of information would certainly be Be very important, I think. Thank you, sir.
Understood. And we will definitely look at those trees in that area. So we cross over a lot of lines in Public Works, and we're gonna talk quite a bit about that, but we also have a curb painting crew that works out of our traffic, engineering, division, so they paint a lot of the yellow curbs, they paint all the parking places around town, spaces, so they're on a basis of wherever, whenever we need them. Right now, they're currently painting 5 points, but they also do the sign replacements around the city, so if there's any signs missing, any signs stolen or anything like stolen, they actually replace them. And the notifications of right-of-way maintenance is something that, that Sarah and I discussed a couple weeks ago, and we just instituted this week. Trenham Road was where we've got some complaints recently about the sidewalk being mowed and trimmed. So what we did is we went ahead through our ordinances and actually sent them our ordinances that is up on the screen right now that requires the duty of the owner and the occupant to keep the premises clean and the sidewalks clean out to the curb. So we sent a mass mailing to the area on Trenham Road to make sure that was done. We sent one to a couple other addresses. That's gonna be a new practice that we do, and at least make the owners aware. And Councilman, I think that goes a little bit about where you were, talking somewhat about that, but we're gonna start sending notifications to people that they need to take care of their area to the curb. We used to hang a flyer, we're gonna send mailings from now on. So we have some records of where we've done.
Like a red tag on their mailbox.
They weren't red, they were just an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, so
My point is simply.
make it seen.
Make them red,
Well,
it's
and
noticeable.
again, I think this is really good stuff. I think it's something we need to really pay some attention to. We'll probably talk about money in a little while, but I was going through the committee stuff, and we have a tree and appearance commission. And one of the things that I really think we ought to take a look at is no offense, change it to tree and appearance to appearance and tree, because, and get this committee working on more and more things we can do to improve the look around here. Because again, the sidewalks and stuff, I mean, we can't edge all those sidewalks. And,
Nope.
and we ought to have contests or something where we ought to do it neighborhood by neighborhood, and feature the sidewalk of the neighborhood and the worst sidewalk in the neighborhood, or something to that effect.
So, and I believe coming up is that Leisha in Public Information is setting up a meeting for us all to start the discussion of how to do that. So so we're waiting on that meeting to be scheduled, and we'll have some
I'll
internal
tell you
ideas.
something, Robert, I just don't think anybody knows that they're responsible for the sidewalk. And the funny thing is, when you ride, say, Trenham Road, for example, it's these people that have built these wood fences right up next to the sidewalk where it's so bad. And I bet you those folks never look at that side of the fence. So.
Understood. So, additional workloads, so since we've added, or not added any, we haven't added any personnel in quite some time. We've actually added Lady Street to our workload, Assembly to Huger. The Graystone Interchange, I know a lot of council members weren't here. We actually got a $25,000 grant from Scott's Miracle-Gro to plant the area there, I guess across, it would be on the west side of, Graystone, to actually make it look a little jungly, kind of matching what you get going into the zoo. So we tried to match theirs. Back then, Danielle Riffenberg did a great job designing that. Hardin, Calhoun, and Reed Street intersection. The North Main intersection, Phase 1 and Phase 2. We now have a North Main intersection, or North Main coming in. I guess we'll consider it Phase 3, which is kind of the middle of that. Pulaski from Divine to College is part of our additional workloads. And then we have future projects. I already mentioned North Main. We have Elmwood from Gadsden to Sumter. It's a replanting. We have Green Street and the Green Street Bridge. Green Street Bridge, we anticipate will open sometime later this summer, is what we're hearing. We have South Main that's coming along in the future sometimes. We have 5 Points And that's going to be coming along, hopefully in the next year or so is what we're hearing. And then, of course, we're going to have some more additional streetscaping on Assembly Street. The other future project that I've wrote down today is, we've heard this several times, but it is the welcome signage to Columbia. That is a passion of a few people here. I know that there's a July discussion happening about that. We've kind of talked about it with Clint and internally a little bit. We know we need to look at the larger picture of this and my analogies sometimes are not that great, but I guess I could foresee that we're gonna have a big welcome to Columbia sign somewhere, and we'll probably have a lot of baby signs that look like that in maybe some of the lesser entrances or wherever. And, you know, it's gonna be hard for staff to do that. We do think that maybe it ought to be turned over to a E&I committee, the Environmental and Infrastructure Committee, to make that selection, to make the idea selections before they present to council. I'm sorry if that's a bad idea, but I would not pick the committee. So how about that? So,
That's
but
probably a better statement.
I mean, there's a lot of ways that we can garner, input and feedback about the different designs that we already have. And I'd like to get all of the council members involved in that if possible, since I've been kind of leading up some of those designs. But you could also use avenues such as COLA today and have people vote the same way they did for the flag. So I'm open, but I agree with you that we should certainly have one large sign and something to emulate that. And I did have a conversation with folks at the Midlands Business Leadership Group, and they're very interested in potentially helping out with some of the maintenance costs of these. So.
And the other thing we would like, the consideration when we do that, and you look at others, and I went to Greenville the other day for a conference and looked at the Clinton sign, is we want to make sure that we're designing the beautification in with the design of the sign that'll be accommodating for quite some time. Hopefully, of course, perennials and not annuals, but that's definitely things to think about.
Couple of questions, Robert. Go back to this first. The university won't pick up some of this stuff that they're doing? I mean, like the Green Street Bridge and everything, I mean, for all intents and purposes, that's a USC deal. They looking at us to do this?
We have already, believe, signed the maintenance agreement probably 2 or 3 years ago out of Columbia, so they did not. They have picked up the Assembly Street maintenance from Huger Street to Pendleton? Pendleton to Blossom, okay? So they did pick up that.
South Main.
We are still under negotiation for South Main and what we need to do.
If they're not gonna pay any taxes, we gotta look for some other things, for them to, I'm serious, I mean, very,
Understood.
very seriously, I mean.
And we will definitely look at that. I do not believe we've signed the agreement on South Main yet. We've seen it and actually responded back to DOT with some of the things that, like sidewalks, that we don't want to maintain the sidewalk on South Main.
When you sign that maintenance agreement, is there obviously, does DOT share revenue, or how does that offset the cost of us taking on that burden?
Doesn't offset the cost at all. We actually.
So then why do we sign?
We would actually take care.
USC, cause that South Main is down to the South Campus deal.
Yeah.
I mean,
And we're already narrowing those lanes, aren't we? We voted to
Yes.
narrow some of those lanes a while back, yeah.
I just would say on that, like I say, that's a USC driven project. It ought to be a USC driven landscape project.
So we will definitely have those discussions again with USC.
And then on the gateway signage, no, I absolutely agree that we need to make sure that we're designing stuff that's low maintenance impact. And maybe Dr. Bustles engages we seem to be having a lot of garden clubs.
They're all over the
Showing
place.
interest all of a sudden in that, and maybe, they do the street program where you adopt a highway, maybe we adopt a gateway. Get these garden clubs competing with one another, it could be fun.
We could do some of the community promotions grant as a prize to sustain their club.
Let me ask you this, when we look at next year's budget, since we're through with this year's budget, you're talking about future projects here and other things like that. I mean, if the economy continues to grow, and we have additional funds available, and appearance remains one of our top priorities. I mean, when Ms. Wilson comes with her budget priorities in December, perhaps we can look at maybe add some more crews, especially if we're not in a, if we're in a hiring situation like we're in. I realize that's the great unanswered question, but,
Councilman, I'll skip ahead 2 slides to go back 1 slide in a minute. So the one thing we did is we looked at the comparisons per capita of other cities around here. And what we did is just tried to do the best we could with beautification budgets that people actually invest in, and took the per capita of the citizens. Columbia invests about $20.87 per capita. Aiken invests $64. Greenville invests $36, a little over $36. Savannah, Georgia invested $50. So I think that's kind of right along with what you just said, is that, you know, we're maintaining at that level.
Saying, don't you? There's lies, damn lies, and statistics. If you wiped out management on a big city, it would raise that way up compared to a small city.
So maybe so, but I will tell you, our management and our forestry beautification division is very slim, okay? So I'll go back 1 slide to our partners. Our partners and for years has been Keep the Midlands Beautiful. We put $20,000 towards that every year. They run several items for us, but Adopt a Street is one of them. The river cleanup is one of them. They run spot litter checks. They get with Samantha every month or so, or I think once a month, and she tells them where she wants the litter picked up and how, and they get volunteers to do that. So the river cleanup is one of the big ones that they do, is keep the river clean. Columbia Green, Columbia Tree and Appearance Commission, as you mentioned, the garden clubs, we do partner with a lot of them. A lot of them come with a few dollars and say they would like to do something. What have we got to do? All of them want the main focal point, as you can imagine, so a gateway may be a great idea for that. The Midlands Business Leadership Government, I think that's what that stands for. Been going to it for several years. They're currently working on the beautification projects of the Midlands gateways. The first 2 is Highway 302 and Forest Drive. They did recently switch people running that again, so we're waiting on a contract from them. And the contract will have to go through 8 or 9 entities, and we're wanting a couple changes to that. So I believe that contract would probably come before city council, so you'll get to see that before it goes anywhere else. Our partners are always gonna be our hospitality districts. And the town of Irmo, we actually once a year, and I can't tell you how many years we've been doing this, ever since Sarah's been here, I know at least, that we fund $10,000 for the maintenance of and the beautification of the intersection out at Lake Murray Boulevard.
All right, well, I got one more, I had questions on that, too.
Uh-huh.
I apologize.
You're fine, sir.
On the hospitality district, this is just a theoretical question for right now. When you're dealing with H taxes and A taxes, beautification in these districts, I mean, at some point in time, do we ever begin to look at, you know, how to say this without getting myself murdered by everybody in 5 Points, everybody in the Vista, but do we look at more beautification with those H-Tech dollars than maybe some of the things we've spent in the past on these things? I mean, you know, when I look at 5 Points, I mean, and, you know, we rode around down there. There's lots of things that we could do in 5 Points that would make the area more brighter and more attractive. And H-Tax allocation that's going down, you know, taking part of that and doing that stuff in 5 Points, is that something you think we ought to be taking a look at as we go forward? Same thing in the Vista?
So Clint and I had a little bit of this conversation the other day. I think currently and I am not great at H-Tax, by the way. I do the public works things down here but I understand that H-Tax, what they do is they enhance the services we currently provide. So, you know, we sweep, blow, you know, do tree maintenance on Main Street, 5 Points in the Vista every night, 7 days or 6 days a week. So, or 5 days a week, and then one morning before church. So that's something we do. If you look at the different levels of services, Main Street's elected to, go behind us first thing in the morning and run a handmade street sweeper up and down the sidewalk, even though we've already blown that off. 5 Points runs a guy with a 5-gallon bucket, I believe, and a picker. I think I've seen that. And then, of course, Bobby's in the Vista, doing his thing and calling in, trip hazards and anything that he sees, so.
Hanging baskets off light poles and watering programs and vertical planters and medians and things like that.
So all of the hanging baskets on Main Street are actually funded through City Center Partnership. We do not do that. I believe they have Hay Hill do them every year.
We
but
actually
they're not
fund the city center partnership.
That's correct, through, right,
But 5 Points doesn't work like that, and the Vista doesn't work like that.
that's correct.
It's just something I would just,
We can definitely look at how their H-tax money is funded.
I mean, it would certainly be to our advantage to at least have a clear, clarifying statement relative to H-tax and, of course, what we do in the Vista, 5 Points, and other areas. It would certainly help, it would help each of us to understand that there is a clarifying and a defining characteristic of what H-tax does and how that's done. Because heretofore, we haven't done that in the past. And if this is a new paradigm, and I think you said that you and Clint have had some conversation, I would hope that that conversation continues. And if there are recommendations we need to hear from you guys, we need to know what they are.
And I think this is what we were looking for a little bit today, was a little bit of, give and take between the two of us to figure out where we think we needed to go. We have some ideas, but where we think we need to move, things around. And, I understand that sometimes contracts can be better. We're going to talk about that. I'm not a contract guy, as you can imagine, but, I think that we can do just as good a job as a contractor, and I think we can do it just as cheap. And I know Councilman Taylor may argue with that, I believe, but I would make my argument, and, I think until proven differently, but I know years ago when we had a contractor doing some work in the Vista and everything, we got to arguing about that weed was there and no, that weed wasn't there with the contractor. So maybe contractors are better off mowing instead of pulling weeds, or differently, or we got to have a better check system. And I'm not saying either or, we just need to look at things differently.
let me ask my question a little bit different way. This way, so currently, you're not getting any H-tax or A-tax into beautification programs,
Correct, we do not.
except for perhaps you could say the city center partnership is doing with part of their allocation.
Correct.
So the question then is, if you were to get H-tax, and you don't have to answer this today, if you were to get H-tax or an A-tax allocation, what would you add into what we're doing to make our gateways and our hospitality districts look even better? You don't have to answer that today if you don't want to.
I'll answer it through maybe opportunities.
There you go.
So, opportunities, I'm gonna run through several opportunities that we've had. Some of these just happened before pre-COVID and could have happened a little bit differently if COVID wouldn't have happened. Little Rock, Arkansas was one of the best one, or not the best one we've seen, but was one that was interesting, and it was called a Bridge to Work. So the Bridge to Work program, the estimated cost was about $175,000, and it was a program to work with the homeless. So our thought was to work with one of the providers around Columbia, maybe several providers, to beautify the city. And what the program did in Little Rock was, it was a goal to beautify the city and working through the next steps, and it was to create community support. And what they did is they took a group of people and they hired them, and I believe back then it was for $9 an hour. They had a supervisor for $12 an hour. At the city's interest of where they thought they needed to be that day or that week, they would send them to that location and pay them. And there was a part of inspection that came after that, so they were supervised. But the second part of the program that Little Rock did is they required lunch for the individuals that went out every day. And during that lunchtime, they actually had some kind of counseling. Ms. Benjamin, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but they had some kind of counseling every day during the lunch time that went out and talked about this, whether it was how to save money or whether it was, how to seek housing or how to find a better job, or so they always required part of that. So we almost got into Little Rock, the Little Rock model, with a company here, with one of the providers here in town. But of course, COVID hit and that very quickly went south. There was an additional request this year from Keep the Midlands Beautiful of $45,200 to run a little bit different model of litter collection. I don't know that they have the volunteer groups, but they may. Of course, we've got a lot of nonprofit groups that could tie into some kind of a Little Rock model. They're all looking for some kind of funding. Grants, we're always looking for grants of anything we can do. I know there's quite a bit of money out there right now. Councilman, you mentioned it, we put it in here, the business and corridor challenges. We could definitely challenge the corridors to do a better job and maybe get out of the commercial corridors and get into some residential corridors, because those corridors are potentially bringing business to their location. So people do but drive by, so it doesn't have to be just in front of my store, but it could be several blocks or many blocks. Of course, everybody talks about youth. A lot of people you talk to talk about youth is easy to get during the school year. They're a little harder to get after the school year. Unfortunately, I don't have any kids, so I can't answer that question. Contracts. So we talked about contracts. We talked about, you kind of got my opinion of the beautification side, but maybe we can get contracts to mow some of our larger areas, such as maybe a 126. And, it's easy to make sure the contractor mows 126 every 10 days, but what that does is that brings a better staff in, that we don't have a mower on the street to actually do some better beautification through the city. Make sure we're focusing on the weeds, make sure we're focusing on the plant material a little bit more. Painting, curbing, I know that's one of the suggestions that came out early from Councilman Taylor. I will say that we did this at Public Works, just right outside of our gate. You go by and look at it. We did it within probably a week after we talked about it. I looked at it this morning. We haven't touched it since. So we took the dirt off the curbs. We took all the grass around it. We swept it. We painted it. The curbs are already marked up. There's grass already growing and stuff back on the medians. So that's been a couple months maybe. So that gives us an idea of how often, not that we'd have to go repaint the curbs, but how often we may have to look at some of the grass and stuff around the curbs. There are some models for a street sweeper that has a electric eye on it that will spray herbicide. When you go by, it'll actually read an electronic eye and actually spray herbicide. So when we're sweeping curbs, we can kill some of that. And that's been out for quite some time. We had some concerns about wind blowing. The other one was the sign removals, and the sign litter is what DOT calls it. As we see those, we're turning them into DOT. They're not, years ago, apparently, according to everybody, there wasn't Google, so you had to have a sign to get somewhere, but Google will get you anywhere you want to go, one way or the other. So they have taken the policies that they don't mind to remove some of the directional signage. So we are looking at the directional signage. So that's some of the opportunities that we came up with.
Robert,
You go ahead, sir.
how many street sweepers do we have?
We have 7, I believe, but we run 5 every day. We run 2 during the daytime, 3 at night. So the nighttime streets,
These are big.
yeah.
They're on a staggered basis, I understand, aren't
They're, right, we have 2 that run residential. So they run Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30. And they are vacuum street sweepers, so they sweep up finer material, they sweep up sand and small debris off the road. At night, we run a 3-wheeled mechanical street sweeper, especially in the downtown districts. And the reason is it has greater turning movements than a 4-wheel model. So, but yes, we do have them, so.
At night.
they?
And
Robert,
they're,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
they go a lot at night.
Well, no,
on
like,
Main Street.
at night, mm-hmm.
Oh, no, I was just saying.
Robert, let me ask you this, and I know this is not a hypothetical question, but at least during the winter, when we've got that real leaf problem falling everywhere. And of course, it poses some, I don't wanna say danger, but it does. When they pick up those leaves, and of course, they run across that drainage system, that has the propensity sometimes of causing an additional flooding possibility because of stopping up. Is there anything that we could do with those street sweepers as it relates to leaf removal? And I know that's a tenuous task. I know it is.
It is, and I've got to answer it in a bigger answer. So I want to start by saying in my 34-year career, and most of it with solid waste under my belt, so 20-some years, we never had what we had last year, ever, that I remember. The most we've ever been behind is about a week and a half. We've never been 3 weeks behind. So but once we get behind, it's all somewhat weather driven for us. We don't know when the first frost is going to happen. We don't know when the first heavy rain event, once the leaves start dying off, because they're told to, is according to Sarah, somehow they're told to die off. We don't know how cold it's going to get, so we don't know what weather we're going to have and how many people are going to rake in their yards. So last year, if you remember, we had a beautiful November, beautiful December. People raked in their yards. We didn't have the personnel. We got behind, and we couldn't catch up. So with that said, the one thing we do is we do have leaf vacuums that we do for our current trucks. What we do is, it's kind of odd, we turn a body upside down on a body, we hook a vacuum machine to it, we bring temps in, and we rake leaves into these trucks. And what happens is it goes through an impeller, it breaks down the leaves. We're getting probably 3 times as much on a truck as we can get with a regular truck loading with our claws. So it complements us. So we're really building up. This year we will have our roll-off truck, which has already become a lifesaver to Forestry already. They actually said that it worked real well last week during the storm. It's nice to be able to drop a container on the street and say, hey, there's going to be a container sitting here for the next 5 days. If you want to rake your leaves and bag them, we'll just be more than happy for you to do that and put them in the truck. But the street sweepers come behind and they actually clean the gutter line after. They can't sweep as much during the winter as they can in the summer because of the heavy curb line, but that's what they're doing, is actually sweeping leaves up. And it's done by a vacuum method. So that's how we complement our leaf collection. So, I'm not saying we'll never get that far behind again, but it was ironic that was the worst year I've ever seen was last year.
Well, what happened last year, of course, some residents decided that, if you take a pile of leaves and put them to the curb, you run the risk of wind blowing them somewhere else. So, of course, the thing that sort of helped most was that folk raked leaves up, put them in a bag. When the truck came in with the clamps, they picked them up, which was easier. So I think that helped tremendously last year because that leaf population was certainly voluminous like I don't know what.
Well, our current personnel level is completely
down.
It is completely different than it was last year. Last year during leaf season, we were as many as 35 personnel down. I think right now, I think she told me 5 or 7. I can't remember. You said between 4 and 6. So somewhere we're right in that area, which is just general. But we can bring 10 or 12 temps in to run behind a leaf loader and run rakes all day. We can pick up quite a bit of material. So we are a little bit better prepared this year. We are prepared as every year. The solid waste division works 4 10-hour days. We always prepare to work Wednesdays and Saturdays during the month of November, December, sometime in early January to get the city cleaned up. We were doing that last year, a long time before leaf season, and that's where we got behind. So, and when you pile 1 week on top of 2, you can only imagine the tonnage that's out there.
What are we doing at Harbison Boulevard? That's the one area I haven't heard mentioned. And it's getting ready to come at us, I'm afraid. It's starting to get age, landscaping.
So
It's in the city.
over the years, we've done several mock-ups of beautification out there. There's some water challenges, I believe, of getting water to the medians. Then the group came forward and wanted to put a Welcome to Columbia sign. So we were going down that road, and then the funding failed on that.
I had nothing to do.
You had nothing to do with that.
Yeah, I don't know
so
why he's pointing at me.
that I did. I just said, I think I showed you the picture. Is
Yeah,
what.
yeah, yeah.
So the Welcome to Columbia sign that came through, Keep Lamented is Beautiful, and she's currently resigned, but that private deal was $1.2 million, I believe. So that fell through, and then Harbison continues. The only thing we do is mow the area is all we do.
Street sweepers go out there?
They sweep the main thoroughfares, Bridge, Park Ridge. So what's in the city, yes.
I just think that as we look to the next year or two, we need to be budgeted in something for, that's a lot of H-tax, a lot of digging A-tax, and a whole lot of property tax.
For years, Councilman, we've talked about putting holiday decorations out there, and we don't have the electricity, and the way the mast arms are not built out there, but the way the intersections are, we have no place to hang anything. So we've talked
I
about
was talking
putting
about
ground
cleanliness
decorations. And,
and neatness more than I was talking about Christmas decorations.
but they also do a great job at Bower and Harbison. That is probably one of the most beautiful intersections in the city. They do a good job planning it every year. And that's done through the Harbison Group. So,
So, quick question. So the signage, and kind of auditing the signage that's out there already, are you all actively then pulling signs with the blessing of SCDOT?
So we won't pull them. They didn't want us to pull them. So what they did is ask us to send them the signs. And what they do is they have every one of them. If you look at the back of an SCDOT sign, they got an inventory on them. Tony was very clear that he wanted to make sure they got them out of his system so they didn't exist. So they're scanning them. So if you see a sign you want removed, just text me, email me, and we will get it to them to get it done. We can't see them all, but with all of us, we can see a lot of them.
Speaking of signage, we recognize a lot of wonderful and heroic people with different kinds of signs around town. But, I mean, they're not the most attractive signs in the world. If there was an entity that wanted them, is there another, does DOT require that, or can we go to a bronze plaque that mounts in the sidewalk, or something that's more permanent that just?
I think it's a little bit of both. I can't remember really Columbia doing an honorary sign, but I know DOT does a lot of signs.
There's two that were put up on Gervais Street as an example. I mean, kind of in a residential transition neighborhood, and it's kind of odd to have a highway sign. I mean, again, the problem, I'm sure the individual needed to be recognized. The question I'm just asking is, can we look and see if, and it may be that there's a nonprofit or somebody that would pay for some type of, like I say, some other type of signage that mounted permanently, in the concrete or something like that,
So what we'll do is we have a collaboration meeting with DOT every month. I will put that on for our next meeting, and I'll try to figure out how they do their signage. I know they just put, I think I seen the news, they put 15 up in the state for the women's basketball team the other day. And they said their locations, which is all over the state, so.
they're just, I hate to say it, they're just it's
Green
a
with the white around
green
them.
highway sign.
Agree. So our challenges is always going to be road ownership. 70% of the roads are owned and maintained by DOT, 30% by the city. Storm drain ownership, we've got that as we go through. Vacancies, hiring, turnover, we're always going to have that. As we found out last Thursday and Friday, or Thursday and Friday and Saturday, the weather conditions are always going to pay havoc on what our crews do. Unfortunately, or fortunately, we have cross-trained enough that when we had a weather storm, as we did last, I keep saying Thursday, but I can't, was it Thursday? Okay, 2 weeks ago. That's great. I missed that. But 2 weeks ago, that we can pull our forestry crews off of mowing, and they can start cutting trees out of right-of-ways. So we have cross-trained enough to put multiple crews on the street that we don't have. The transitional,
Quick question, just, same lines. Henry's not here to protect himself, but do we do any collaboration with the parks maintenance guys in situations like that and stuff?
we do, if we get far enough behind, and the easiest one for me to go back would be the flood of 2015. We not only pulled Parks and Rec employees, we pulled water, we pulled wastewater, we take tailgates off trucks. We put a fairly good, I'll call it fleet out to pick up some streets in some areas real quick. So we do have the ability to pull them all in as the year goes on, and the bigger the deals. I think the snowstorm of 2004, we did the exact same thing. So it's kind of like all hands on deck, and all the departments are ready for that. Transitional growing periods, special projects that we do throughout the year. So with that, I think we've discussed a lot, but we'll take any questions, comments.
What do you mean by
directions.
transitional growing periods?
Transitional growing periods is just different times when things mature. You know, so we've got to cut back things in the fall. We don't cut back things as quick as other people would like us to do. So when we have spring to fall, we're going to order our annuals, and it's going to take us a few weeks to go through that transitional growing period when we're going to take our old stuff out, till what we've got, put our new stuff in, and let it grow back. So that transitional growing period doesn't look as good. It's kind of planting and my wife and I differ on something, but it's kind of planting that pot at your house where I think you ought to put one flower in it, and Shelley thinks you ought to put 3 flowers in it. The one flower will go to 3 flowers if you'll just give it a little bit of time. That's what I think we mean by transitional growing periods.
What are we doing on Elmwood now? We're taking the shrubbery out?
Gone.
Because of the homeless?
It's gone, and the contractor should have already started planting this week.
What are we replacing it with?
Yeah.
Do you know, Sarah, off the top of your head? Yeah, it's low. It's all low growing.
It's all low growing.
So for the reporter in the room, if they're missing all the shrubbery out there, it's to address a homelessness issue on Elmwood Avenue.
That's correct. And the shrubbery's been gone for probably 6 or 8 weeks. So,
I'm taking some more this past week.
good.
Sarah, let me ask you this question. When you say low growing, are we talking about in terms of height?
Yes.
Talk to me a little bit about that.
So I think most of what we designed to put out there was gonna be 18 to 24 inches at most.
That's the max.
That should be, now, there were some taller stuff
Right.
spaced out that won't grow all the way to the ground, that you can, some trees that you can prune up, so you still have that visibility on the bottom.
It was designed to be able to be seen through. You'll be able to see through it as you go down the road.
What we've been having happen out
That's
there
right.
is gals buying alcohol and laying in the bushes.
And the other
Absolute
thing,
mess.
the new stuff won't all grow together, so there should be space between it. They're not gonna be able to hide behind things.
So it's not like they're gonna connect themselves each to the other plant.
Right, they won't, if it connects, it's gonna be small stuff,
Small stuff.
18 inches tall.
What's happening with the, that field right behind that area? I know we've like planted things in the past, but when it's not blooming, it's kind of an eyesore.
So the flowers are growing.
That's our land,
Yeah,
right?
no, it's not.
Okay.
Who's it belong to? Yeah, Pastor Jones. So he called me last week. We talked about it a little bit. So what we've done usually is we spray an inhibitor for grass in there. So I told Pastor Jones what we would do is pull a soil sample on it this year. We need to figure out what's lacking. There's no reason that the first year it was one of the draws of Columbia because of the sunflowers. We haven't had a sunflower bloom since the first year. We don't know why, but it can't be anything but the soil. So we're going to pull a soil sample. We'll probably go ahead and mow that real soon, and he will continue to maintain it until next year. And hopefully we can find the additives we need to put in it to make that gateway where people came from all over to take pictures of that field the first year. I ran into many people and professional photographers taking pictures out there. So that's our goal every year. We got to figure out why it won't grow. So I'm an old farm boy, so the first thing you got to do is get a soil sample and figure out what's going on.
So initially, we will take care of the first initial cut.
Yeah, we'll cut it for him.
After that,
He'll cut
Pastor
it. He'll
Jones.
maintain it the rest of the year.
all right.
So there is some reference in A-Tax and H-Tax about highways, roads, and streets. So we'll follow up to see whether or not there's some opportunities to use some of that funding for some of these projects. We'll just have to look. There is some reference to highways, roads, streets, and bridges, but we'll have to look and see if the interpretation leads itself to being able to use that funding for these kind of projects.
Ms. Benjamin, how specific are those?
That's all it says, Reverend McDowell. It just says
Okay.
highways, roads, streets, and bridges providing access to tourist destinations. So I don't know whether that means you have to clear the path. I don't know whether it means you have to make sure the street's accessible, if it's that limited, or is there an opportunity to expand that? But we'll look and we'll get,
Good.
more information.
Well,
It may
certainly-
be limited, but we'll check.
Okay, good. All right. Other questions?
Remind me again, so I'm assuming that we have like a counterpart at Richland County that does some of this stuff too, for the ones that are unincorporated. Is there any overlap ever that we work with them on?
So I don't know that Richland County has a true beautification division, and I don't believe they have any street sweepers.
Okay.
So you should notice very obvious when you run out of the city into the county, you'll see some debris build up in the curb line, you'll see cigarette butts. It's very clear generally to me that transformation, but I don't believe, I know they have a forestry beautification side, but I do not believe they have a right-of-way beautification. Correct. And then they have a special services division that will work on illegal dumping and stuff like that.
Okay. Any other questions? Committee?
So more strategically, essentially this would then, you would say current kind of priorities and opportunities is what makes up the Columbia Clean Initiative? What is the initiative? There's a lot of things we talked about, and I want to be clear about what our call to action is.
So the initiative is take a wider look at this and see which, if any, we want to do a buffet style. Do we want to add contractors to complement our personnel? Do we want to reach out to a Little Rock, Arkansas style to see if we want to do something similar to that? Or do we want to pick 2 or 3 of them and do kind of a hybrid model of, what would make Columbia look good?
Okay. Dr. Bustles, any other questions? Mr. Taylor?
I think I think we've consistently talked about beautification and appearance at our retreat, during the budget, during our meetings. And so I'm supportive of whatever we can do to get some of these things moving along where we start to see an actual difference. Because it sounds like we have the structure, we've had some challenges, many of which are out of our control, but I'm just not seeing where we can be. So I would recommend to the larger council that we move forward with identifying opportunities that show immediate progress in our beautification and appearance.
This is the first step to getting that done, I think. And much appreciated, Robert.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Sarah, thank you so much. Clint, thank you all so much. Just a question off the cuff. All water leaks stopped? I'm just playing. I'm just kidding now. I'm just kidding. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Clint.
So Reverend McDowell, in the essence
ma'am.
of time, because I know you all wanted to end, I was hoping we could maybe flip 3 and 4.
Can we do that pretty quickly?
Yes, sir.
I want to talk a little bit about the equity index and I want to suggest something with that. If you could say a word about just boards and commissions. I think that there's still some work we need to do with our boards and commissions in terms of a real clarifying of what their particular functions are. One of the things that I found in that large notebook was this document, And of course, 6 committees, of course, related to council are the committees that we have listed. We do need to do some work with the other boards and commissions. I don't think today is the day nor the time, but we do need a clarifying statement. And if you would help us get to that point.
Absolutely, yes, sir. So you all have seen this before. I just want to kind of refresh your memory. This was an overview that we gave you all when we did when we gave you your notebooks. And so what we wanted to do is just kind of make sure you refresh your memory on this document, talk about the listing of the boards, the committees, the task force, the boards and commissions, and then have a plan of action where you all can address some specific concerns and issues you have about each one of them. My suggestion would be that we take it, because it's a lot. If you see in the handout I've given you, and like Reverend McDowell said, you do have the 6 council committees, then you have your special committees, task force, and commissions, and how you do your appointments. You've got your land use boards, and then you have your 31 list of external boards and commissions. And so, I know there's some thought about changing some things about the boards and commissions, doing some streamlining, maybe eliminating some things, making some term limits, those types of things. Probably some of the notes that Councilman Taylor has provided us with the stickies. So we had a suggestion that maybe we could devote some of your future Administrative Policy Committee meetings to addressing the specific categories. You could take a meeting to talk about the land use boards, take a meeting to talk about the external committees, and then you all can make some suggestions about how you'd like to see some things change. We'll definitely review what you've sent, Councilman Taylor, but is that kind of what you had in mind with some of the stickies?
Let me just say, I haven't gone through all those and made the notes on them. It's not quite as discombobulated as it might have seemed at some
Okay,
point in time. So
okay.
I don't think you're gonna find there's that many changes that need to be made.
Okay.
I mean, I really do, I really don't think, I don't think it's gonna be that difficult. I think what we've gotta do is, I went through and I made notes on each one. We've got some situations where council appoints this many, but it can have up to this many.
Yes,
We
sir.
probably should define those things. We've got some appeals that don't meet but once every 2 or 3 or 4 years, that if we can figure out a way, if TK can figure out a way that we can, where if you're appointed to one of those appeal committees, you're appointed to all 4, so we don't have 4 separate committees for it. I think that would be an easier thing. And then the last thing is really more than anything else is, I think, and if we had some great interns this summer, if you got one hidden somewhere you could use, to take those terms and put them in an Excel spreadsheet that's got the dates that people's term expires, so we're always able to look, in other words, keep making it a perpetual deal, so when we appoint people, they get added to it. So you always have a 120-day look, or even maybe a 6-month look ahead, to where you can advertise for 90 days, and you got 90 days to look at it and do it. But it's not as much overlap as I thought there would be.
Okay,
And there's a
great.
couple in there that I think we might want to broaden. The Tree and Appearance Commission, I think we're hearing all throughout town, that's a really important thing in the city, that we might want to put some little bit more teeth into that one or something. But I'm gonna tell you, Pam, I think if you got an intern and you guys can take a look at that in an afternoon, I think we can do everything that needs to be done on that in an hour.
Okay, great. That's great news, because that's what we really wanted. If you wanted to dedicate some time, that we could dig into it a little bit more. But what we can do is work on the suggestions that you've made for us. Like you said, get an intern, get someone to help us. We also may have some capabilities with Matchboard to do some projections on term endings, and so we'll get you a spreadsheet
And that
of
way, I'm
those
just
things
saying
as
on
well.
that way you know what's coming up. And there's some issues where every council member appoints somebody, but it doesn't say who appointed who, and the terms are up. I mean, it's just this little bookkeeping. And then the cool thing, if we could do it, and it would make things a lot easier, would be if we could have a standard set of operating guidelines on these that every committee was subject to, whether it was attendance and participation, because they're all individually on there. And I just a standard set of guidelines that we could do in one vote that says this applies to the 30 appointment committees, whatever we have.
Sure, and we could possibly look at that, our city code, section 2-59, and maybe add some of those
That's what I'm
standards, some of
saying.
that
Yeah.
standard language
That's
to
right.
that.
Yeah.
About attendance, about participation, different things that
right.
you guys felt
Because
were
a couple, yeah, and
important.
a couple of them, like, for example, if somebody doesn't come to the meetings, the committee has the right to put them off.
Right.
But the city manager or council ought to have the right to put them off, you know? And like I said, just standardize that, but I don't think it's the full deal that we thought it was going to be.
Good,
I
okay,
think
well-
you'll chuckle when you go through it.
Good, well, we can certainly give you some proposals to add some of that language to standardize some of you
All of
all's.
us can chuckle at one time.
Yes, sir.
The only thing I wanted to add to that was also just taking a look at allowing new people to step up and serve in leadership positions within the committees. I'm really interested in also tracking how long someone's been the chair. So, you know, with kind of new folks coming on and some of these committees being re-energized, I think it's time to maybe, you know, say thank you to folks that have been there a long time, use them for their institutional knowledge, but allow somebody else to step up and lead the group.
And that's what if we did a broad guidelines that applied to everything, we would probably want to put term limits in as the chairman and maybe even term
Yeah,
limits for.
And I,
yeah.
and I think, Ashley, I think some of that information is available in it.
Well, currently we have a handbook for boards and commissions, but the handbook has been updated, and I think we can update it to make
To show that,
changes that you won't want.
okay, good,
So that's the phase we're in right now.
good. Well, the intent of this conversation today, particularly with boards and commissions, is to start that conversation. And starting that conversation, of course, simply means we got to dig a little deeper into the weeds of that of boards and commissions to see with clarifying statements how they look and how they function. So, of course, one of the things that I would possibly suggest as we get to that point with council is that's an ongoing conversation right now. Is that fair?
Yes, sir. We've got our
When I say an
notes.
ongoing conversation, putting some meat to the bone.
Absolutely.
Well, the only thing I would add to that is we did pull some committee reappointments because we were looking at this and I promise you, I really don't think it's gonna be that difficult a thing to do. And I'd hate for us to stop appointing these commissions for an indefinite period of time, so, like I said, I went through every single one of them, and, it's just, like I say, it's not that bad, so.
So is your recommendation as a committee that we continue to do the appointments that we have, that come up as we're
Well, I
going
think
along
the
with this
problem is we
process?
just need to have some I'm not so sure if we've been alerted to what's coming up in the next
Okay,
60 days. In other words,
okay.
We should be able to track whose terms are about to expire so that we can start recruiting or getting the word out.
This is, maybe and one of the things we could do is we could only appoint people quarterly if we wanted to. You know, one meeting, and so you're just looking at, right now, okay, what's expiring, say, for example, in the third quarter and the fourth quarter, and you put those out,
Well, I think that's the conversation we want to have, no question about it. And of course, that's the conversation, and of course, Ashley, some of that conversation you have with some updated materials and data being placed into that folder or file or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, we provided a vacancy list when we gave out these lovely binders, so we can update that vacancy list and,
Okay.
and provide that as well, or put it in a different format.
Yes, if we could do like
So you
Excel,
wanna-
electronic, that'd be awesome.
there were a little bit of issues on the vacancy list and on how the vacancies that are there get appointed. It's kind of just an odd deal. Like I say, some of them that we've actually even discussed, I don't want to be misquoted, but I think like the bicycle committee, which was up for last time, the bylaws say each council member appoints a person. And then you can have up to X number. We ought to just decide what the X number is
and just be done it. But the people who are expiring, it might have been Dr. Bustle's district that she appoints, and it's not appointed by, that's where it said, that's where it gets a little bit interesting. And then I think we have to look at some residency and occupational thing. I mean, we got people that don't live or work in the city serving on some of these things. People that have moved away to New York that are still listed on some of these things.
Or they work in 29203 or 4 and live in 29209.
Could be. I mean,
And that's, I'm sorry.
my point is, it's not, it sounds like lots of things, but when you add them up, it's not that many things. And then the last piece that TK's probably got to take a look at, that is probably the biggest thing that we need to adjust, is on several committees. Some are city committees, some are committees that are created to handle state statutes that have specific requirements for certain appointments. Do we have to, can we broaden that? Or do we have to go by those things?
Some of them are by state statute.
That's what I'm saying.
They
That's
have some
correct.
requirements, yes, sir.
That's what I'm saying. So we just, but, and then is there any means to change it? Like I said, I really don't think it's that.
Well, it's a two-pronged conversation. It's a conversation this is what we wanted to do today, is just to raise the issue with some specificity to them in terms of how we might get some of that work done as it relates to our boards and commissions, integrating that into a document. And I think Mr. Taylor alluded to the fact that it's not going to take long, but we need to have that conversation.
Pam, what I did for you, I think, is, and Ashley, is I circled all the expiring positions on all of them. So if we can, it might be the easiest thing is to look at what's coming up between now and the end of the year.
I hadn't seen that document.
And we may just
You
go
got a
ahead and
copy
do
of it?
those
It's in
and
that big
work on
binder.
these as time.
I'm looking at it,
We can do that.
please.
I just don't think it's quite as bad.
Great.
If you would, I'll go back and look in the big binder, but just run me off a copy of that so I won't have to look in the big binder.
That's all of that.
What?
He went through every single thing in that big binder. I don't think that,
But we can certainly talk about things to add to the code. We can certainly review things that maybe
All right.
have some
Well,
statutory
that means I gotta look through the big binder then.
implications. And we can look at giving you all a more accessible vacancy.
I guess what I'm asking for,
projection.
Ms. Benjamin, is the smaller version of what's in the big binder. And if we could do that, Mr. Taylor is very studious, and if he's going through that big binder, hand clap, thank you very much.
But I think the easiest thing for right now is just look at what's expiring between now and December 31st. And let's just deal with that.
Let's exhale it
While
out.
we're dealing with that, we can fix anything else.
yeah.
Let's
I think
exhale
that's
it
a great
out,
plan, and I think that should be our
okay?
recommendation.
So if you just get that, if you want to send it to a committee first, and then we'll send it to council.
Yeah, let's do that first. I think that's the approachable thing. Let's do,
And I would say for Ashley, I think we probably, I think it's July 1st. I mean, I think if we probably should look at it, we could do them all at one time, and it's between now and the end of the year, is advertising everything, even if we've advertised before again in August, and do the appointments in September.
And it could, and I like the idea of potentially having like 2 times a year that we update these so that all terms either start January to January or June to June, so that it makes it easy. You don't have these random one-offs coming off,
Yeah, the only problem with that is some of the boards that are statutorily required.
They start
They
weird?
start,
Okay.
they have their own process. And some of the other
We can
external ones.
always delay it and just do it all together.
Do
Okay.
it just like you do a zoning meeting, except for
Okay.
every other meeting, you do this once a quarter.
Yeah.
all right?
That
So
way
you have what you got.
That
what
way
you
you're
need.
only advertising once a quarter, and you're appointing.
Cool.
You got
That help?
That,
Okay,
We are on to the
We'll look
equity
at that.
study.
yes. Let me make sure all minds are clear. We okay? Mr.
Yep.
Taylor? Yes, sir. Dr. Brussels? All right. As you know, several years, I shouldn't say several years ago, but years ago, that was probably back in
2019.
2019. And I think you were a part of that.
I was. I helped design that study.
That committee. All right, let me get through. We did this in 2019, and of course, when we did this committee, it was, for lack of a better word, like a blue ribbon committee. We came up with this equity index study, and of course, as I said, as you sort of indicated, Dr. Bustles, you were a part of this. Very interesting study. We didn't get it physically in our hands until 2021. Was it 2021 we got this? We got the equity study.
Yes, sir.
The thing with the equity study, that it did not give any recommendations, nor did it give any suggestions in terms of how it might function, what implications. There were no implications there. One of the things that I really want to suggest is that I've had a conversation with Mayor Rickerman about this document and about how we might move forward with this document. One of the things that he sort of indicated, and he and I had this conversation, and that was allowing the Community Relations Council to sort of take the lead on this in terms of allowing them to look at this document, perhaps after looking at this document, bringing necessary recommendations back to us for implementation. So one of the things that I would like to suggest is that we take this document and we forward it to CRC.
And we would the ask would be that now we're developing some kind of strategic plan or priorities of what we can do based on this data.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
So what do you think, what would your suggestion be then for, I know originally this conversation stemmed out of the Advisory Committee for Equality. And one of the things we talked about last time was we'd like for that committee to encompass all types of equity and diversity. Would you recommend we keep that committee?
Well, if CRC is going to take the lead with this thing, it would not, in my estimation, it would not be important for us to keep that committee. I think you being a part of this at the very inception, the genesis of this committee's data, of course, came out of this committee, and I would think that after submitting the data, that committee ceased to be. It would certainly be a suggestion that because you worked on that committee, that you be a part of CRC, because you had some expertise in putting this thing together. So I would think that an advisory committee on equity would cease to be, and that CRC takes on that responsibility. What you think?
I think that's
What you
fine.
think, Audrey?
Yeah.
Good suggestion.
So that's going to be your recommendation, Reverend McDowell, to the council?
Yes, ma'am.
Is to
I'd like to do that.
do away with the ACE committee?
Yeah.
That's correct. Now, if we could do that, I think because CRC is so engendered with social justice issues, inclusion, equity, that whole frame of things, it certainly lends itself to a real document that they could perhaps bring back to us. And I don't want to give you too much work, but to bring back to us some real tight recommendations how we might implement this thing. We okay?
Sure.
At no cost? I didn't even think about a cost. No, ma'am. No cost. I'm sure there will probably be some language to say that it's gonna cost. They've already committed to it. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. I didn't attach a dollar figure, nor did I have a dollar figure to attach. They want to take the lead on this. Okay, sounds good. Is that all right, Ms. City Manager? I love it. Thank you, ma'am. I'm glad you better, too.
Based on the H tax.
All right. No, that's not a H tax.
No, we're talking about something
Okay.
based on some of the other.
I just heard H tax and CRC. Huh?
I just wanna make sure, y'all talking these acronyms.
No.
CRC, Community Relations.
Community Relation Council.
I just like to confirm that stuff.
You know, every now and then you have to say,
The
hey, man, what are
alphabet
you
soup
talking
of
about?
government, that's right.
So are we in consensus with that?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Happy to support that, yeah.
All right. That concludes our agenda for today. I am very appreciative for committee's participation. Robert, Sarah, thank you so much for that. Thank you so much, Ms. City Manager, for being with us today, and glad you're better. Thank you. Thank you, Post and Courier. Thank you. Don't take down, don't spill the beans on us now, okay? Thank you very much. You all have a good day. Joe, thank you too, sir.